Hey, what up? This is Zach Guilford from Midnight Mass, and you're listening to one of my favorite podcasts, Pop Culture Pastor.
Pop Culture Pastor.
All right, Cody. If you're anything like me, you're currently buried under a mountain of Thanksgiving leftovers. And your only real choice today is, do I eat pie for breakfast or dinner? And while you're contemplating that, sir, we are going to dive into some fresh pop culture. Because the world does not stop spinning because we overate and napped.
Hopefully it doesn't.
So we got a lot of news on deck. We got a lot of other stuff going on. And I'm probably going to rewatch Planes, Trains, and Automobiles maybe 5 times this weekend.
Son-in-law.
And maybe we'll throw in a son-in-law watch too. We forget about the Thanksgiving movies. We talk so much about the Christmas movies, but we kind of forget about the Thanksgiving movies. I don't when it comes to Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. That's a yearly rewatch for me. But Son-in-Law, I kind of forget about sometimes. And I shouldn't, because it's really Pauly Shore's best work in a Hall of Fame career.
It is.
Why are you laughing? What? He's the weasel.
He is.
In all seriousness, Son-in-Law is probably his only movie that's actually pretty quality.
He's in a Goofy movie.
That doesn't count. That's not his movie. I'm talking about his movies. Because weirdly enough, this is a hard era to explain to people that, like, back in the 90s, he was on MTV and was cool.
Like him and Carrot Top, there was a phase where, like, there was just some out there people that got big, and I don't know why or how. And
I mean, Pauly Shore headlines like 5 or 6 movies, right?
Unfortunately.
Like, it starts with Encino Man with Brendan Fraser. That kind of kickstarts Brendan Fraser. Sean Astin's in that too, isn't he?
Yeah.
And then, then he like straight up headlines a bunch of movies, which Son-in-Law's the best. And it's Thanksgiving. The background is Thanksgiving.
Yep. Thanksgiving break. College.
Yeah. So it's good stuff. And it's famously one of Cody's favorite movies, according to Geek Jackson.
Yes. All other movies, according to Jackson, are compared to Son-in-Law.
Is there a story behind that, or do we want to let Jackson
I didn't make him. I invited some friends over for like the night before Thanksgiving, and they're like, should we watch a movie? And I'm like, have you guys seen Son-in-Law? It's a Thanksgiving movie. And so we watched it. And then from then on, Jack has foretold stories of me making him watch it every year, although it's only happened once.
I don't see anything wrong with that. That just seems normal.
It does.
Why wouldn't you watch Son-in-Law? Jackson, quit being so judgy on Son-in-Law. Making fun of Son-in-Law. He does it so smartly, too.
He does.
He has this like subtle humor, these subtle jabs with his humor.
The movie that we will review today, he said, Cody told me it's better than Terrifier 2, but not up there with Son-in-Law yet. Neither of those statements were uttered by me, and I will tell you that it is not better than either of those movies.
Just a little preview.
Yes.
This is Pop Culture Pastor, the podcast. My name is Dave. Cody's here.
Judgmental Cody is here.
Judgmental Cody. That doesn't work with the pattern.
The alliteration. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Jackson is not here. We have no geeks in the round table with us, perhaps because nobody else wanted to talk about Gladiator II, with good reason. But we got to get to the news first, because the news that was making all the headlines, and for the life of me, Cody, I do not understand this, because James Gunn has already said these things, but you sent me this article of him making this quote, and he's doing this interview. Or no, it was on Threads. Gunn was asked if he or DC Studios will ever do a release schedule similar to Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios, that, like, they go to the cons, they do these drops with these schedules. And Gunn says he plans to just say another movie's in development when it starts. And then he said this, that rocked the geek world. It won't be exactly like Marvel, because nothing is greenlit before we have a finished script.
Pew pew! Shots fired.
And Cody sends me this with shots fired. Daniel Rickman and other big scoopers on social media are like, shots fired. And I'm just like, he's literally said this like multiple times.
Multiple shots fired. Yeah.
Also, get out of here, James Gunn. I know this isn't the same James Gunn who announced like 12 projects before they've even done one movie. And he's talking about how, we're not doing drops. Like, you already have.
But he didn't tell you when they're coming out.
Oh, yes, the specific part. That is semantics, sir.
Where Marvel has said, Blade, it's coming out this year. Mm-hmm. Blade's coming out next year. Blade will never come out.
But, Cody, they're doing the same thing. Marvel puts dates on it, which you can disagree with or agree with or disagree with, but they're doing the same thing. It's just to get people riled up at comic convention.
They are. But shots were fired, and Jimmy Gunn taking souls and snatching them.
Well, and because he said that, he said really the only thing we have right now are Creature Commandos, Superman, Supergirl, Peacemaker Season 2, and the upcoming Lanterns thing. But he's announced a bunch of things. The Brave and the Bold, Swamp Thing, Teen Titans. There's a lot of stuff in development that he's said we're in development.
Yep.
And whether he's doing it on social media, which seems to be his vehicle of choice,
I'm good with.
Or Kevin Feige's dropping it at a convention to get applause and he puts dates on them, which we all know are suspect.
Still waiting for Blade.
So is Mahershala Ali.
Him and I both.
Somewhere Wesley Snipes is like giggling. Maniacal laugh. All in all, I just think it's funny the way these people say things on social media. And I don't think it was James. Like, he said that before, and he said that before not in a context of dissing Marvel. He's just saying, like, I'm not going to do that because that's not my style, is essentially what he's saying, which is fine. But it's funny how we take things on social media and we'll make them about like, he's blasting Marvel. It's like, no, he's not. Him and Feige are buddies.
Shots fired.
You're such a tool, Cody. From this ridiculous story, was there anything else you wanted to talk about with this story, or just you wanted to yell shots fired?
Shots fired. But honestly, I'm getting excited because we are getting closer to a rumored drop of a Superman trailer.
Yeah. I am looking forward to this. I am still cautiously optimistic about Superman. I just feel like he can't Guardians of the Galaxy Superman, right? Have we talked about this before?
Yes, we have.
We have. Superman is not the kind of character that you can go all silliness with, which is what he did with Guardians, which works with them.
I will say his version of the Suicide Squad, which he could have gone full Guardians,
was pretty serious.
It had a more serious tone to it, and his bad super child movie, Brightburn, it had like some little sprinklings of comedic, but it was very serious throughout. Like, you're like, this looks like Ma and Pa Kent, and this looks like Kansas, and then this kid's killing everyone.
Yeah. And just to be clear, I think when you're doing something intense like that, you should have moments of levity. You should sprinkle that in. So I think, I think James Gunn's a great filmmaker. But I think just like any artist, he tends to put pieces of himself in it. And there are pieces of James Gunn that we've seen in the past that don't necessarily mix with Superman. Or really Batman. It'd be the same thing. Like, imagine James Gunn doing a Batman movie. You'd be worried too.
I'm not worried. Give him all the DC properties.
Contrarian Cody strikes again. Cody, you remember Melissa Barrera?
I do. It's been a while. But yes, I do remember her.
So Melissa Barrera was the one who was unceremoniously fired from Scream 13 or 14 or whatever they're on now.
7 or 8.
She was the one who was fired after she had made comments on social media and in conversation in an interview about Israel, the Israel-Hamas war. And she basically referenced it being a genocide and things like that. She said things that were super political.
She did. She took a stance.
Yeah, she did. EW has this article that I'm just going to say off the top, I take umbrage with. Okay, not because of her. I don't have anything against Melissa Barrera, and I think if you want to speak out on political things, that's fine. My point in all of this, before we even get started, is either there are consequences for this or they're not, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't think there should be double standards. And I think what EW does here is offer a double standard. So let me tell you what I'm talking about here. EW has this article about Melissa Barrera. The headline says this: Melissa Barrera says substantial job offers went quiet for like 10 months after her Scream firing. Subheadline: there were times when I felt like my life was over, she says of that difficult period. Now, I granted, feelings matter. I'm interested in how she feels, but to say that she felt like her life was over when people are actually losing their lives in the conflict she referenced seems a little odd.
I had a couple different thoughts with this article.
Oh, you've seen it?
Yes.
Okay.
So my initial thoughts were, yeah, I imagine some of the acting offers did dry up just because there's some heat with you right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. But at the same token, I don't recall her outside of the Scream franchise.
Yeah.
So, like, some people go on to do some great work post their introduction into, like, horror movies. Paul Rudd would be a good example. But some people, this is their niche after. Yeah. Like, you are kind of typecast and you are stuck in this vein.
But I think it's fair to say she's young.
Yes.
And this was a big, I think, must have been a big moment for her in her young career. And so this happening at this time, I get why she says it's hard. She says this: it was the darkest and hardest year of my life, and I had to reevaluate everything. There were times when I felt like my life was over. And I get that, and I identify with her feelings, and I even feel sympathy for her in that moment because she was living with the consequences of something I think we as a people don't really understand yet. And that is this weird ground, especially in the pop culture world, where are our words going to have consequences and reactions, or are they not? Because my problem mostly is with this EW article kind of framing her as a victim in all this. And I want to be like, okay, now do Gina Carano, who was, same thing happened to her. One could argue her career was more hurt by her firing from The Mandalorian. She said way less innocuous things, but still pretty political.
Oh, yeah.
And nobody thinks she's a victim. Nobody. Okay? That's not fair. There's probably some hardcore conservatives who think she's a victim. But I'm not even saying one or the other is a victim, isn't a victim. What I'm saying is we need to be consistent. Either there are consequences for the things we say or there are not. But you don't get to pick sides and say, well, for this person, no, because they're right according to me, and this person because they're wrong according to me. Like, we're either making space for different worldviews or we are not.
And I will say, like, if you look at people who are directly affected, let's go civil rights era. Mm-hmm. Like,
yeah.
They knew that there was going to be negative, extreme consequences for their actions whenever they marched, whenever they did sit-ins, whenever they spoke out. And there were people that were going to empathize that this shouldn't be this way. But they knew for their cause to be getting the attention it deserves and for changes to happen, personal sacrifices were going to have to be made. And so if something is meaningful enough for you that you think it needs more attention and you are willing to make some personal sacrifices, then speak out about it. But if you weren't willing to make those personal sacrifices or face the potential ramifications of what you just said, then you got to stop and think, is this worth it or not? Because if your acting career is worth more than the conflict that is going on in the Middle East, then stick with your acting career and don't speak out about politics. But if you think lives in the Middle East are way more important, I wouldn't argue with you, then speak out.
Yeah. I think as ministers, we have a special view of this because we already understand and knew we were entering a space where there are things we might have to say or feel compelled to say that might not sit well with a certain group of people. And we kind of accept that and that it might affect our standing with those people. So like when you go into ministry, you kind of already know that because we live in a super politically charged culture. So even going into ministry at all, you understand like, oh, you know, there might be some people who don't like me just because this is what I do. They might even know me and my personality. And that's why I want to be very careful and say, I don't know this Barrera actress, but I don't have any animosity towards her. Mostly I'm looking at Entertainment Weekly a little side-eyed here. I'm giving them a little side-eye because I want to be like, now listen, bring that same energy for people you maybe don't agree with who are saying pretty innocuous things in the scheme of it.
So it would have been a lot, I think, more of an integrity move and a good journalistic move if they did do a side by side.
Yeah.
And highlight that, oh, this actress also suffered for speaking out about her political opinions.
Yeah. And like, listen, I think that's actually brilliant, Cody, because I'm not telling journalists to not do editorials. No, do an editorial, but go back to the way journalism used to be and really challenge people. Don't just entrench yourself on one side of a, 50-50 hot button issue in this culture and pretend that there's no nuance and complexities. Sit yourself in the nuance and complexity part and challenge people. Challenge people to think about each other as real people instead of just labeling them as quote unquote the other side.
Yeah.
That's all. So yeah, I wasn't a big fan of that article. Here's some little levity to offer up. I saw an article on EW as well as I was reading this one about Frankie Muniz, Malcolm in the Middle guy.
Oh, yeah.
And he was talking about his family and how he's reflected as he gotten older. Apparently he was on Michael Rosenbaum's podcast. And it says this in the EW article: before he got his big break on Malcolm in the Middle, the actor's parents got a divorce and he decided to live with his mom in New Jersey. His sister initially lived with her dad, but eventually she too moved in with Frankie and their mom, which was right before he landed the role of Malcolm. And so they had to move again from New Jersey to LA. And she said, I'm not going, and ended up being raised by their grandparents. And it was interesting to watch a little piece of this podcast and see Frankie talking about the sacrifices made by other people in his family is like coming to grips with this. He said, quote, "It actually makes me a little bit sad to realize that my mom and I, or me following my dreams and the things that I got to do, affected every single member of my family." And he basically goes on to say he's deeply grateful to them. He's still pretty close with his sister, so he talks to her. And I just thought that was refreshing. I thought that was deeply refreshing because I don't know. First of all, not many of us can identify with that. Like that life, your parents kind of selling out on this weird kind of thing most of us couldn't dream of. But I just thought, look at Frankie, who's maybe kind of turned into this pretty solid human because he's seeing what has been done for him and he's grateful. It's also another example of how our choices are not just about us. They do affect everyone around us.
Oh, yeah. There's consequences for your actions, good and bad, and it will have an effect in quite unique ways. Literally, my mom has recently learned like the impact that I have had at my other place of employment. That like everyone's like, oh, you're Cody's mom. We just love Cody. And it like hearing those stories, I'm like, oh, hey, I must have done something halfway decent. But like you leave a mark with every decision you do, and it will affect how people view you, how they view your family, what your loved ones have to go through, good and bad, based on what you do. So stop and think. That's all I ask.
Yeah. Well, Frankie Muniz is realizing what legacy is, right?
Agent Cody Banks to you.
Most people in the culture would think he has more of a lasting legacy, right? Because he's been in movies and TV shows and
racing cars.
And people know who he is, and that's legacy. But actually, he's realizing what real legacy is. This idea of the relational aspect, the sacrifices people make who love you, that want to champion you, that want to help you win at life. And that is more of a legacy because relationship leaves more of a mark.
Word.
Love leaves more of a mark. And I just loved that story. So I threw that in there. Now we're going to switch gears and send some unlove.
Yeah.
It's time for us to review Gladiator II. It's time, Cody. I'm like a man marching to the gallows.
Conflict Cody.
We'll be back to review Gladiator II. Greetings, Dave's Blurb Voice here. In a world where we do movie reviews on a podcast, you need to be aware that we are going to spoil the nerd out of this movie. We know that spoilers aren't everyone's cup of tea, so if that's you, go ahead and hit pause, see the movie, and then come back and listen to this thrilling podcast later. The Pop Culture Podcast movie review starts now. All right, Cody. I feel like I'm sitting front row center for a reunion concert of Motley Crue.
Oh,
but without the good drummer and the lead singer. Like, oh, this is gonna be terrible.
This might as well have been a tribute band.
Oh, man. And Gladiator, that's actually a good way to look at Gladiator 2. It's like a tribute movie you see in like Branson. It's like a tribute concert.
So I did get asked the question, and I'll ask this question of you. If this movie would have just been called Rome, the Gladiator Games, would it have been as disappointing to you as it is being billed Gladiator 2?
No, not at all. There's a component here that we'll get to where I think they absolutely, it's not that they just make some choices story-wise that makes this movie worse. They make some story choices that make the original, that cheapens it, which is a big problem in Hollywood. They do all these sequels, they do all this stuff messing with the IP, and then they don't even realize that the choices they're making are cheapening plot points from the old ones.
Cody did mention this on a previous podcast.
Yeah. And we know if you've been listening to us for any length of time, you know that we've already talked about it, and it's what happens, and we'll get to that.
Logan cheapened by Deadpool and Wolverine.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the absolutely same thing is happening here. They make a decision about the plot that seems like it's super interesting for this movie, and they don't even think about how that affects the movie that took place before, which is in fact a classic, a 12-time Oscar award nominated movie.
And I think it won 10 of those.
Yeah.
So
like this, but yeah, let's slow down. We're going to get there. We saw Gladiator 2, so you don't have to.
You can watch it.
Here's the confusing thing about this movie. Well, first of all, let's say directed by Ridley Scott. starring Paul Mezcal, Denzel Washington, Pedro Pascal, Joseph Quinn, Connie Nielsen, lots and lots of people in this. I was
going to say, there was faces.
Yeah. Budget, not an exact number, but it's listed $210 to $310 million.
That's what I would have guessed. That would have been the 250 mil ballpark.
All I'm going to ask before we even get into this is, can we please put as much effort into the script and the story as the money for the special effects?
So, like, your reaction so far, I can tell you definitely did not watch Napoleon.
No, I did not watch Napoleon. But if you're going to tell me that there's a lot of similarities in the problems, then I'm going to believe you, because I think Ridley, well, we'll get to that.
There's a lot of similarities, and somehow it may have been even, like, more extreme.
Yeah. Here's the blurb. Years after witnessing the death of Maximus at the hands of his uncle, Lucius must enter the Colosseum after the powerful emperors of Rome conquer his home. With rage in his heart and the future of the empire at stake, he looks to the past to find the strength and honor needed to return the glory of Rome to its people.
That wasn't even the movie we watched.
Narrator: he did not return the honor and glory, the strength and honor to Rome.
He could care less about his home of Rome.
Directed, as we said, by Ridley Scott. This is the truly weird part for me.
He was more obsessed with Nubia for 90% of the movie.
Yeah. This is the truly weird part about this, Cody, because this makes me, I did not read any reviews going into this movie. I didn't want to be influenced in any way. I wanted to see it fresh. And after I got out of this movie, I went right home and started looking up reviews. And I am stunned. This movie has a 71% on Rotten Tomatoes. Screen Rant and several other sources gave it an 8 out of 10. Variety lambasted it, which I'm like, makes me feel like I'm not crazy. There were some top critics out there who kind of nail what's wrong with this movie. But there's a ton of people who like this movie, and I'm just speechless.
So I think that in the same way that there are horror film junkies that they will just dive into bad horror movies and enjoy it just because there is an element of scare or whatever, even if the story's just complete trash. It's how we get all these Halloweens and Friday the 13th and all those films. There is that for action movies, especially combat movies. And it doesn't matter if the script's good, if the action looks good.
Yeah.
In which I will give my dear friend Ridley some props. Some scenes were definitely filmed where, like, whoa, look at all that blood squirting everywhere, and that's gnarly.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. I will say this. Let's do the broad take on the movie. This is the plot of the movie in a nutshell. It's Gladiator. It's essentially they're hitting the same beats as the first movie, except they don't mess around with that pesky character development stuff.
Not at all.
Because for the first third of the movie, they don't really want you to know Lucius is who Lucius is.
Well, I don't know why they revealed it in the trailer then.
Yeah, well, right, exactly. You drop all the hints in the trailer. Everyone in the theater knew it was, but you spend half the movie pretending he's not him, so he can't. We literally get no character development from him. Unlike Maximus in the first movie, where we get this deep look at his relationships, how he interacts with Marcus Aurelius, that he's a strategic. The first scene of the movie, we understand his strategic brilliance. Our first look at Lucius is, dude, you got the floor mopped with you. Like, he gets whooped. He's a victim.
Mm-hmm.
And it really just throws us right into, like, they get to Rome so fast in this movie. They have the performance in the outer gladiatorial regions, right? Just like in the first movie. And then he makes his way to Rome, just like in the first movie. And it's almost beat for beat kind of the same thing going on. The only difference is the wild card, which in the first one, I would say the wild card is Proximo.
Yeah.
In this one, the wild card is Macrinus, who's played by Denzel Washington.
We will just call him Denzel.
Yeah. But other than that, it's beat for beat, about the same thing, with some wild exceptions that we will get to. Anyways, long story short, he comes back to Rome. He's used as basically a pawn by, the higher ups to try and foment a revolution that was kind of already in motion anyways, because the Caesars are ridiculously cartoonish and bad.
They're interesting.
And it turns into this whole strength and honor thing that they really didn't earn. Like, there's no buildup. There's no honor to what he's doing beforehand. He just wanted vengeance.
And like, it really doesn't flush out anything like with his longing for his dead wife or anything. Like,
yeah. It comes to a head. And a side wins. That's essentially the plot.
Yeah.
And if that seems like it's kind of hard to understand, then yeah, because there's really not a plot. They're hitting beats from the first movie. That's about it.
Yeah.
So Cody, what's good in this movie? What would you say is the good parts of this movie?
The action sequences.
Yeah.
The fights.
Yeah.
Even in their non-historical accuracy of like
the historical accuracy,
the naval combat in the Colosseum looked cool.
Yeah.
I mean, the sharks, that was a touch.
We're talking about what's good.
Well, I mean, them like killing people as they fell in the water was kind of cool to see, but
yeah,
like,
when did Ridley Scott turn into Dr. Evil? He's like, you know what? This set piece with the water in the Colosseum is pretty awesome, but you know what would really tie it all together? Sharks with freaking laser beams attached to them. Like, what is going on?
Why did he have Napoleon shoot the pyramids? I don't know.
I love that Ridley Scott, this is actually endearing to me, this part. I love that Ridley Scott is at an age and a place in life where he's like, I don't care about your history. That part is kind of hilarious to me because that seems to be where he's at. He's in full, I just don't care mode about your historical accuracy. And it's basically said it.
So I feel like what Michael Bay is with explosions, Ridley's like, I'm going to take it up another level way past the historical context, and this is who I am now. Yeah,
I mean, listen, Pearl Harbor, Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor lands more in reality than this movie does. And that is quite the statement. Just quite the statement. Yeah, the battle sequences are, of course, pretty mesmerizing. Ridley's always had that knack. He's always had the ability to organize and present these huge, complex battle sequences that were such a staple of Gladiator I, which we talked about last week on the pod in our Be Kind Rewind. And this is no different. The technicality and the way he presents these battles are impressive. That's not lost on me. I have here Denzel Washington. This movie pretty much proves his greatness. He can take an absolute joke of a script, which is clearly what they were working with here, and make it seem like it's Shakespeare.
Politics.
Yeah. He is so special, man. He is really maybe one of the best actors of all time. And he really takes this character. This is literally, I'm not even joking when I say this. He's the only interesting character in the movie.
Honestly, I'll agree that like the only character I wanted to see more of.
Let's see if it's the same guy. Because I have one name written down here.
Oh,
go ahead.
Besides Denzel,
yes,
is I actually wanted to get more of whoever was with Joseph Quinn.
Oh, okay, the other Caesar. So yeah. I have Joseph Quinn.
Joseph Quinn was great like with what he was given.
Yeah, I think he steals some scenes.
But then I'm like, for the most part, the other twin or brother was like,
Fred Heckinger.
Yeah, was quiet for most of the movie until he's like, well, me and my monkey are going to rule this joint.
He plays Emperor Calabatos or Caracalla or something like that. Joseph Quinn is Emperor Gedda.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think both of those, as I diminished the entire acting, I want to say and point out that I have written down here what's good, that I think Joseph Quinn actually steals some scenes he's in. And I don't think the other guy was bad either. He just kind of becomes a caricature, like the crazy guy who's suffering from a mentally debilitating disease guy with a random monkey.
Tale as old as time, Dave.
Which, I don't know, Ridley has a weird thing for animals all of a sudden, and we'll get to that.
Also, if you watch Napoleon, you will know this.
Oh, okay. So what animals are in Napoleon that is weird?
So I know for a while, like Joaquin's doing like pig noises just randomly. I feel like there is some like fowl, like chicken or guineas or something.
I feel like getting Ridley and Joaquin together at this point in their careers is like the gatekeeper and the keymaster in Ghostbusters. Like, I feel like that's a recipe for disaster.
Don't do it.
And they did it with Napoleon. They went there. Do you have anything else good to say about this movie? Because that's my list is done.
Let's see. Let me think. You know, I think that the big names in this do better than they should with this script, but like they're not like, oh my goodness, give them an Oscar.
Yeah.
And so
Denzel's not going to be nominated for this.
I hope he is.
But like when you factor in everything here, this may be the best acting job of his career. Like, seriously. He makes this seem, every time he's talking, it's like it's Shakespeare.
I saw a negative comment about Denzel, and
what?
So they're like, why is everyone else talking like they're British and he's talking like an American? And for me, I kind of went like, the Roman Empire is so vast that there's going to be different dialects. And if we're not going to be speaking in Latin or Greek, then I really don't think that there's an issue here. Another winner of the movie.
Also, how does Pedro escape that?
Yes.
Pedro's not speaking with any sort of accent other than American.
Yeah. So another good part of the movie, all the people that like Virgil.
Okay. Yeah, so this is the weird thing about Ridley Scott, though. Because there's moments where we've already talked about where he says, forget your history. Then weirdly, he goes hardcore into history in other places.
Yep.
So they quote things.
I was going to say that quote's great.
That are from antiquity. I don't know that they work well in the movie.
No.
Especially not when you repeat them like 5 times.
But the quote about sliding down to hell, that I was like, oh, hey, that's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, there's actual historical stuff in here that are deep cuts, deep pulls, which I'm like, you did that. But also sharks. So, Cody, let's move on to the real star of this show. What's not so good?
There's so much.
Yeah, we'll just alternate. Just hit me with one.
The retconning is horrific in this.
Yeah, let's talk about the retconning. Let's talk about that.
So I'm not a big fan of retconning to begin with. The Rocky franchise basically tried to retcon Rocky 5 out of existence. It didn't work for me because once you have it on screen, it's real, it's there, it has ruined everything under the sun. The Halloween franchise in the new trilogy tried to retcon and undo that Jamie Lee Curtis was Michael Myers' sister, which was the only plot device that really worked from the originals. Is like, oh, this is why he's obsessed with her. It's his family.
Yeah.
They're like, let's go with Russell Crowe and the virtuous Russell Crowe in this movie from Gladiator 1. And he was having relations outside of his marriage that he was so devoted about that he killed a horse trying to run back home and save its wife and kid. And like, nope, he's not that virtuous. He's the scum of the earth.
Yeah. Let's be real clear. The first movie, what makes Gladiator so great is the very believable devotion he had to his family, his wife and kid. The whole movie's built on it. From the very beginning, that's all he wants to do. He's this great general. Only he can do what he's doing. We all understand talent versus the simple life, right?
Yep.
We understand that dynamic, and all he wants to do is get home to his family. And he's such a valuable general that he can't do that. And then when he defies the emperor and his family gets killed, he's bent on vengeance. So much so, not like this character in this movie who's just bent on the vengeance. He's like, Maximus feels like he's already dead.
Yep.
So he just doesn't care anymore. And he's going to take out as many people as he can with him. And so the whole movie is attached to his devotion to his family in the first movie. And so when you take this movie and you think you're just making a decision for this movie because it ties to the first one and they needed ties, right? The problem with a Gladiator sequel is it's hard to tie to. Yep. It's not a movie that directly lends itself to a sequel. So they decide,
especially when you put Russell in the dirt.
Yeah, we make Lucius the son, the illegitimate son of Maximus. And in the process, you completely destroy the character of Maximus from the first one because it's all junk now. It's all crud. It's all not sincere. It's not genuine. Dude, your wife was so special to you. Your family was so special to you that you were messing around with the royal daughter of Marcus Aurelius.
Nope.
And you had a kid that you seemingly knew. I mean, let's say what's unsaid. He'd have known.
Yep.
And he does not pretend to know in the first one.
Literally, it's like, I knew your father. He was a good guy.
So Maximus, one, now what you've done, what this movie has done to Maximus in the first one is, one, make his devotion to his family seem hollow. Two, make him a bad dad.
Yep.
To all his children. Like, Ridley, did you not see this? Like, why would you do this? A classic film. Gladiator will be remembered as one of the greatest films of all time.
I was going to say potentially Ridley's greatest film.
Absolutely.
And now I'm like, it's Thelma and Louise.
Yeah. The retconning of Maximus destroys him in the first film. It's terrible. The first thing I have listed for what's not so good, the CGI. For as good as Ridley is at battle set pieces, the CGI in said sequences was lacking and in danger of pulling the viewer out of the scene, which it did for me.
Mm-hmm.
The monkeys, bro.
Yeah, the baboons.
They bear no resemblance to any monkeys on Earth. They're like mutants. They're bloodthirsty. And the whole time I'm like, what is going on here? And that's going to speak to a bigger problem in the movie that's on my list later. The shark's movement was almost cartoonish in the water, the naval battle sequence in the Colosseum. It was just wildly bad. CGI just took me out of some of those battle sequences that I should have been getting lost in and being like, wow, this is grand. And so much is here delighting my eyeballs, you know?
It was not cinema.
What's not so good? What's your next not so good?
So they give you like title cards at the beginning telling you how much time's passed and stuff. They don't tell you how these twins came into power.
No, it's a mystery.
And it is a huge mystery considering like where we in Gladiator 1,
yeah,
like the Senate, it has control, and they will get to pick and choose how they are run in the future. And Gracchus is like, I got this. Let's just get this guy in the dirt, and we'll go from there.
Nope. Everything about the end of Gladiator 1, which we talked about last week on the pod, that was subtle, and that if you understood the history, see, that's the problem. Gladiator 1, we understand their liberties taken with history in there, but it never feels like it's outside of reality, right?
Yep.
And I'll talk about this more specifically in a bit. But the end of that movie, and we talked about this last week, if you know that Rome doesn't go back to being a republic, it makes you have the way Ridley tells that story is it gives you what is heroism? Does heroism always produce results? Does sacrifice always produce results? And for humans, I'd say no, not always. And there's he really said something with that. Flash forward to this movie that does the same thing just on a grander scale. And again, totally blows that thought out of the water. And by that thought, I mean the subtle nature of life sometimes.
Yep.
And yeah, it was just bad. Next thing on my list is the animals. Like we said, I'm not sure what his fascination is with animals all of a sudden, and especially ones that don't act like any animals on Earth. The monkeys that was in the arena, that was so weird. Because one, monkeys can jump, bro. They're just loose. Why wouldn't they have just jumped into the crowd and started tearing people apart? And if you're wondering, Dave, monkeys don't tear people apart like that. Well, the ones in Ridley Scott's universe do.
I've seen Nope. They tear people apart.
Not like this, man. These things were mutant vampire monkeys.
Well, yes, they were mutant vampire monkeys, but I'm saying like they're stronger than men. They're going to rip limbs off.
I don't know if these were, I don't know. I mean, we could debate this all day. It's not the point.
I've seen Nope.
Nope's not a documentary, bro.
It's loosely based on my real life story.
The animals. I'm just going to say the animals. The sharks were ridiculous too. And completely unnecessary.
Yeah. Like it's known that there's accounts of naval battles happening inside the Colosseum.
We'll get to that because I have very specific historical stuff to say about that.
But like the sharks, come on, Ridley.
Yeah. What's next on your not so good list?
Like, the music really didn't stand out.
No. Is that a problem with sequels though? I feel like they have to, pay homage to Hans Zimmer's music. So they would feed it in at some times. And then you have this weird, like, kind of amalgamation of, the current story's music and the old music. And it just feels really mishmashed.
You should have brought old Zimmer back.
Yeah, that would have been nice. I have the script. The script is so bad. There were times in this movie in the theater with other people in it where a character says something that's supposed to be super dramatic, and I literally laugh. The whole where death is, we are not. Where we are, death is not. And they say that with such gravitas in the movie, like it's not ridiculous to say. Like it first of all flows in any way. Sounds cool, none of the above. Now here's the thing, that's like from a real Roman saying. Yep. From like a story back then. That's like an ancient thing. And I'm just like, so there you went all historical accuracy, even though it doesn't sound cool at all. And it's kind of clunky dialogue.
In English, it probably doesn't work. Maybe in Greek or Latin, it sounds a lot more lovely.
The script underwent multiple revisions over several years, the internet says. Scott and the writers struggled for 10 months to develop the story until they revisited the idea of focusing on Lucius as the quote-unquote survivor of the original film. The premise for the sequel began with the emperors Caracalla and Geta exploring the dynamics between the two brothers. They were more the focus in the early scripts. But the actual words they're just not very good.
Nope.
Yeah.
Somehow, so like the first script had some good lines to it. It may not have been the best of lines consistently. Like they were sprinkled in, and Russell Crowe over delivered and made them sound even cooler than they actually were.
Yeah.
This one, somehow the lines are worse, and like Denzel is trying to salvage it, but it's a one-man job.
Honestly, I got the feeling watching this movie and had the thought later on, it seemed like this script was written by AI. Mm-hmm. It has this kind of AI feel. If anyone out there has tinkered with AI at all and had AI try and write you something, you'll find that with AI, it'll use words that seem big and grand. It'll make it seem like it's something, but if you really listen to the words and try to understand what it's saying, it's sort of like cotton candy. It's really empty. It's really hollow. There's not sincerity or genuineness attached to it. And so when AI writes you something, it can feel kind of clunky. And I got that feeling a lot. And I'm like, did they? Did they use AI to write some of these lines? Because it's not good.
Oh, I hope not.
What else is not so good?
So the last thing, because I could beat a dead horse.
I'm going to beat this horse.
Is that there's no emotional beats because they really don't allow for anything to develop. So Lucius is like anti his mom for a good chunk of the movie. Anti Pedro Pascal because he ordered for his wife to get shot down. And then like flip of a switch.
Yeah.
He's like, I love you guys. Yeah. How dare you kill them?
Yeah. And the worst part is you're finally, we spend enough time with him that you're finally getting a handle on his motivations. And then they flip the motivations of the character out of nowhere. And it does a disservice to the entire movie because you're like, okay, now he flipped and I don't really understand his motivations and I don't care about the character.
And yeah, there was no like developing of any emotions on the behalf of Wonder Woman's mom, because that's who she is now.
Now listen, the plot point of him changing his motivations is a direct rip from Gladiator 1. Mm-hmm. Maximus goes through the same thing. We talked about this last week, but do you remember how we said they did it well? Remember how that happens? They're having a conversation and it's all born out of Maximus's devotion to his family. And you remember what she says? She says, what about my son? She doesn't say our son. If it was his son, she would have said it. Any human would have said that. She'd have been like, what about our son, Maximus? She doesn't say that. She says, what about my son? And he has empathy because he understands the bond that you have with your children, her child and his child. He makes that connection. They don't have to be one and the same. And you ruin that moment. By the way, you also ruin what is a real switch of motivations. He says, you know what? You're right. I should care about other people's sons.
Yep.
That should be a part of my choices should reflect what's good for everybody's sons. That's a powerful moment and it's super smart and it's a super good reason for someone to change their motivations. Here, because you're just copying the first movie, he just switches the motivations and there's no real basis for it.
Nope.
Terrible. Let's talk about, first of all, what's not so good. Pedro Pascal is basically window dressing. I don't know how you take an actor like Pedro Pascal and make him just there.
So
he's like a tree.
I was going to say, like, I was worried that he was only going to be in it for like a few moments in the moments that we saw in the trailer. He's there.
He really only deserved to be in it a few moments, really. He's in it too much because you don't do anything with him.
I'm like, I don't know why we're just having him sit next to these weird twins.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that. Well, I have a couple ways I could go and recast it, but the last thing I want to talk about, what's not so good, and I saved this for last for a reason, is because the realism. Now, I want to preface this. Gladiator 1 has things, and listen, this is not coming from an uneducated place. I majored in history in college. I had a specific concentration in ancient Rome. So I do know things about ancient Rome. I'm not an expert, but I do know some things. Okay. The realism in the first movie, obviously they take liberties for the storytelling aspect, but never at any point in the first one do you feel like it takes you out of reality. Marcus Aurelius acts like Marcus Aurelius would. Mm-hmm. He's wise, he's philosophical, he's all these things. His demeanor fits. Maximus is a made-up character who leads kind of a revolt, a revolution, but that revolution is all peppered with the understanding that nothing's probably going to change. We talked about this last week. It never really gets outside of that. The events of the film, you understand, are not going to be of historical note, right? Mm-hmm. It's just a little flare-up that people will forget about in a few years, except for your hardcore, I remember that Gladiator. Man, he was amazing, right? That movie never really makes the viewer feel like you're sitting outside of reality. Flash forward to this movie. The twin Caesars, Geta and Corvallis, Caracutta, whatever his name is. They're twins in this movie. They're not twins in actual history. They were brothers. They did rule at the same time. It's close enough, although I don't understand the whole the Caesars wearing makeup. There were a couple Caesars that were kind of goofy and did wear makeup, but for the most part, that wasn't a thing. They're just trying to make them look effeminate, and I'm not really sure why.
Because the one that lives the longest, he had an STD.
Which is interesting because syphilis doesn't come around till like the 1500s, which is clearly that's what they're saying he has. That's not a thing back then. But there's lots of not a things back then in this movie. And that emperor in particular, we don't have a lot of information on Geta because Caracalla does assassinate his brother. And Geta, he's kind of been lost to history. He scrubs him. There's actual paintings with his face scratched out.
Yeah.
He was bitter, right? But Caracalla is actually according to sculptures and stuff, a big, manly dude who had military training. He doesn't have a monkey. He has a tiger. This is a dude who has a pet tiger. He's like Tyson. All right. Like this is a real dude. And so it's weird. There's liberties taken with that to make them seem a certain way when really the reality may have been more interesting. The mini Roman civil war that takes place just outside the gates of the city, which by the way would have been way farther away from the inner city than it looked. Rome's a huge city. There's suburbs upon graveyards there's so much till they get out to the open there. And this makes it look like they're half a mile away from the middle of the city.
Yep.
And also it's like a mini civil war, which nah, bro. No, Rome does those are done by this time. The water in the Colosseum, as you pointed out, probably maybe happened early on in the Colosseum's existence. When they start digging tunnels and stuff under the Colosseum, like they do, it can't happen anymore. They actually had amphitheaters specifically for I can't remember, there's a word for these naval battle reenactments, but they actually have amphitheaters made for that. So it probably wouldn't have been in the Colosseum. Certainly not with sharks.
All the sharks, Dave.
Follow me with the logic here. Sharks live in saltwater. Rome is not on the coast. So how are they transporting these sharks?
They're importing all the finest salt water.
They don't have plexiglass containers and planes. Like they literally got to haul these sharks on wooden carts. Sharks also breathe by moving. So if they're too constricted, they're going to die. Even if they're in salt water. Like this was the sharks. I literally laughed out loud when I saw the sharks. Then I saw them move and I was like, this is ridiculous. Gladiators riding on rhinos. I don't think we have any documented case ever of a human riding a rhino.
But it looked cool, Dave.
Right. It looks awesome. Which again, the first movie, while taking liberties with history, you never get the feeling it resides outside of our reality. This movie feels like it's completely outside of our reality. Newspapers, Cody. Dude has a newspaper, even though the printing press won't be invented for 1,200 years.
They had a lot of scribes just hammering those out.
I love contrarian Cody. It works so well in this segment. Numidia, the very opening battle scene of the movie. Numidia had been a Roman territory at this time for a long time. In fact, the Battle of Numidia that clinched it happened a clean 300 years before this movie purports to take place. And yeah, there's also, I could go on a long time about the historical inconsistencies, but those are the ones I feel like actually play a role in the movie where you're like, what is happening?
Yeah.
Do you have any deeper themes, Cody? The story is so rough. It's hard to get a deeper themes. I have here written, honor your mother and father? ?
Kinda. And, I guess seek the higher virtuous calling. 'Cause like for a while we're just motivated by the death of our wife, and then we just completely forget about her. And then we move to Rome is a dream, and we gotta have that dream become reality. And Grandpa was right.
There once was a dream that was Rome, Cody. And that dream was absolutely destroyed in this movie. All right, it's time for Recast It. Pick one role to recast that you think improves the movie.
Honestly, I think if you recast the twin brother that lives the longest.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking as we were talking. Fred Heckinger, who plays Emperor Caracalla.
And you cast him as Gonzo. I know you didn't ask me to Muppetize it, but that would make the movie so much better.
Well, honestly, as we were talking about it, and I was talking about his real life historical counterpart, I thought, why not make him like he was? Like a man's man who's military trained, who has a tiger, not a monkey, who's not a joke.
Oh, yeah.
He's formidable. It makes Denzel that much more crafty. It makes his character better. It makes Lucius's character better. Like, what? Why is he a joke? Why are we playing him as a joke? I feel like that, but I'll go with what I wrote down here. I'm recasting Lucius. I'm taking out Paul Mezcal.
Oh, I actually like Paul.
I don't dislike him. Here's my reasoning. He's too brawny. He's too buff. We're meant to understand that he's not the caliber of fighter as Maximus. Right? It's referenced several times in the movie. He says it himself. I'm not as good as he is. And yet...
Yeah, you lost that battle, buddy. I watched it.
And yet he's a much more physical specimen than Crow. Nothing against Mezcal's performance, which I thought was fine, but I think the movie is better served if they wrote the character as using his intelligence and strategic thinking to win, like Maximus, like his dad, who you make that decision. After all, Lucius grows up in partly in Caesar's house for his early life. We see him training with the servants in the first movie, sword fighting. By choosing Mezcal, who is an ex-rugby player, I didn't know if you know that.
He might have made a better twin.
Exactly. He could have been Caracalla. He's a good actor. I don't have any problem with him. I'm just saying the choice of him is weird, given that he's the spawn of Maximus in this movie. And by choosing him, this ex-rugby player, with the look of him, I think it confuses the viewer with what he's written as. I think someone like Will Poulter, who played Adam Warlock in Guardians of the Galaxy 3, has more of a better look. He's fit, but he's a little bit more sleek, his body style. I think it fits a little better. He looks like a grown-up version of the kid who played Lucius. And he's got some muscles, but he's not quite so intimidating as Mezcal. I just think it would have been more believable, and you draw a better connection to Maximus. This dude doesn't look like Maximus's kid. His mom is tall. His dad was lean and tall. And then this dude is a short, stocky fire hydrant. It's almost like Maximus wasn't his dad.
Leah did say after we were watching it, she's like, well, he kind of sounded like Russell Crowe.
Listen, the actor did fine.
Oh, yeah.
He's an up-and-coming actor, and I believe it. I think he's fine. It has nothing to do with the way he acted the role for me. I just think he's a weird choice for given the way you go with the story.
Oh yeah, and especially considering like the kid in the first movie, like there's nothing that yells he's going to become a behemoth.
Yeah, who, by the way, Spencer Treat, whatever his name is still around. He's still among us, and he's still an actor.
We could have had him.
It's so weird, but it just is another in the long line of decisions made with this movie that seems like they said, what would be cool? It's like every decision they made was an answer to that question. Oh, you know what would be cool? If we got up-and-comer Paul Mezcal, and who's kind of brawny and buff to play this part.
So I also wonder for my dear friend Ridley, if his choices in casting, especially with like leaders, is that like all leaders are weird and bad.
Yeah.
Because again, like you have heard me talk about Napoleon nonstop. Yeah. There's nothing cool about Napoleon after this movie. Like if you took that as this is supposed to be a historical depiction, you're like, oh, Napoleon was weird, like really weird. And I don't even know how he got to leadership. And it's a good thing he died.
Yeah, well, there's something there, I think, because why make the change he does with the Caesars that he does? Where, yeah, I think he's definitely trying to say something Hollywoodish and political in a way. But if we started talking about that, we'd go for another hour.
We would. And I'm not here for that.
And it's not... You know what? I expect that from Hollywood. Like if you're a Star Wars fan, oh, really? They're introducing their politics into the way they're telling the stories? No. Like we're used to that by now. So I agree. I think it's there. I think he has a problem with authority.
Yep.
But Cody, who's the winner of this movie?
It's two people. It's a split winner. It is Russell Crowe for not being in it. And it is Joaquin Phoenix because he now doesn't have to shoulder the blame for Napoleon.
I thought you were going to say because he's not in it either.
And he's not in it either.
Oh, that's amazing. That's good stuff right there. I'm going to go the obvious route. The winner of the movie is Denzel because, frankly, as I walked out of the theater, I just felt bad for him. I felt sorry for him. I'm like, dude, you were the best and only good part of this movie. And when I walked out of this movie, well, I'll save that for the rating. Who's the loser of the movie?
So it is probably Connie, aka Gal Gadot's mom in Wonder Woman, because she goes from this kind of beloved, empathetic character in the first movie, and then she's like sending my son away, and even though I am still in power and prominence, I'm not going to search for him. Yeah. And I am now linked to this awful movie. Yeah. I didn't get Russell Crowe's advice.
Speaking of bad story points, riddle me this, Cody. By the end of Gladiator 1, she's so fed up with nobility and this political scene. You're here to tell me that she didn't just leave? When she handed it back to the Republic, she stuck around and remained noble? And then sent her son away so she could still play the noble game? Talk about character assassination from the first one. The daughter of Marcus Aurelius, the one who Marcus Aurelius says, if only you'd been born a man, what a Caesar you would have made. This intelligent character stayed and played the nobility game? Oh.
So yes, that's why Connie is the loser.
I mean, there are so many choices in this script that are just completely bonkers bad. I hadn't even thought of that one until just now.
Yeah, that one stood out as soon as I saw her come on screen, and they for sure confirmed, oh, this is actually Lucius, and oh, yeah, I just was being a bad mom and was running Rome.
To me, I've never understood your Rocky V thing. I've never understood it. But my loser of the movie is Gladiator 1. Because this movie absolutely throttles it, and I can't just pretend it doesn't exist. This will affect my enjoyment of Gladiator 1. Knowing that they go this direction with the story is toxic to Gladiator 1.
So in a side category, Cody wins.
Cody's the winner. All right, Cody, how many monkeys out of 10 are you giving Gladiator 2?
Like, I think if I had not watched it in theater and it was free on streaming, I think I could muster up a 5.5.
Wow. You are giving it some flowers.
I am. Just based off of, there were some cool sequences.
Yeah.
Denzel does a good job. It was a movie.
Yeah, it's a movie. I'm going to give a half a point for Ridley's battle sequence mastery. I'm going to give 2 points just to Denzel Washington alone. That Denzel Washington's in your movie, that's a 2-point bump. That's it.
2.5.
It gets 2.5 for me. As I walked out of this theater, I literally thought to myself, this is one of the worst movies I've ever seen in the theater. I walked out of one that was Dude, Where's My Car? And to be honest, the script for that movie wasn't much worse than this one. This is a bad movie. I am completely befuddled at how anyone saw this movie and thought that was good. Like, it's a diversion. It's so bad it was interesting to me. Like, I laughed a lot. My wife at the end, when, by the way, we talk about another brilliant story moment when Denzel decides as a 70-year-old he's going to fight Paul Mezcal. All his planning, all his masterminding comes down to, like, I'm going to best this man in Mortal Kombat. No, you're not. And when he gets his arm chopped off, my wife started laughing hysterically, and everyone looked at us weird in the theater. I was like ducking down in my seat. I was like, I can't believe you laugh like that. They're going to think we're serial killers.
Especially when Denzel is losing body parts.
I mean, but how ridiculous is that plot point?
Well, considering throughout he had been an excellent puppet master.
Yeah, it's so bonkers. And yeah, I'll say it again. This is one of the worst movies I've ever seen in a theater. It gets a 2.5. I feel like that's a bonus.
This is what I expected when they announced Gladiator II.
Initially, yes, but the first trailer they crafted was pretty good. The second trailer was when they alluded to the possible retconning.
And I knew from the first trailer, I'm like, Ridley knows how to film good scenes. Don't do this. I don't know how big studios keep giving him hundreds of millions of dollars to make movies. Did we not watch Napoleon?
Bonkers. But Cody was right this entire time. I'll say it. Cody was right about this movie. It's trash.
Oh, as soon as I watched Napoleon, I knew this was going to be it was going to be on that par, and it was going to be bad, and I was going to have to watch it again. This train wreck.
Absolute dumpster fire. What did you guys think? Did you see Gladiator 2? Maybe you disagree. Like I said, I'm totally perplexed.
You might think that this is cinema.
Some of the reviews out there have me pretty perplexed, but tell us what you think in the social media posts for this movie. Let us know, and hopefully we'll review something much better in the coming weeks.
Not Napoleon.
We'll see you next time.
Pop Culture Pastor. Pop Culture Pastor.